Welcome, Rajinder sir. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, great.
And congratulations to you, Nandaji, on your son becoming a chartered accountant. The results were declared today.
Thanks.
Heartiest
Thanks a lot, sir.
congratulations to you. Heartiest congratulations to you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
On
Thanks a
behalf of
lot.
the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting, as its chairman, I sincerely congratulate you, your entire family, especially your son on clearing the CA course. It's a
Great,
great,
great. It is.
and to
Thanks.
all the participants who have joined this webinar, it is a very happy moment for all of us as we join congratulating Nandaji and his family on the stupendous achievement. Sir, we wish him growth, we wish him success, we wish him prosperity in all the endeavors.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. I'm truly honored, sir. Truly honored. Thanks a lot.
And very esteemed
Bye.
participants, the speaker of the day, Yukti Arora ji, the coordinator of this program, CA Inderjit Kaur, the secretary of the committee, CA Aarti Bansal ji, the office staff, Arun Agarwal ji, Miss Gyan ji, and the technical support, which is provided by the team of AFC, and then to all the participants. It is here wishing you all a very glad good evening. Today, we have here with us very esteemed speaker, CA Yukti Arora ji, who is going to take us through the internal audit of cyber security. I need not even tell you what is the area of internal audit all about. It is a sunrise area of practice, and it is one of the most important areas which all of you will agree that in the recent times and in the coming times, which will gain importance in the area of practice. Esteemed friends, on this note, I welcome the speaker Yukti Arora ji and thank her for sparing her valuable time. Esteemed friends, we also have here with us C. Nandaji. Sir, the towering personality, a person who leads us this committee from the front. Nothing moves in this committee without Nandaji's nod. Sir, thank you very much once again for blessing us with all your experience and expertise. We are here because of you. We are here because of your vision and your futuristic attitude and the mission that you have carried on in this particular area of practice. CA Inderjit Kaurji, thank you so much for being a young achiever, in fact. Nandaji, when he suggested your name, we're very happy that young people are getting an opportunity on this platform, on this institute forum, and the entire country at large is watching you. Welcome to you also, and to our committee secretariat, headed by Aarti Bansalji, very effective, very committed. Thank you very much. Friends, I will not stand between you and the topic. And in fact, Nandaji is all waiting to give you a brief overview. And let us hear Nandaji, and then Yukti Arora ji can start. Over to you, Nandaji, on a very happy note.
Thanks a lot, Chairman P. Rajendra Kumar, more commonly known as the GST man, the man who has turned the corners by his indulgence in GST and putting across the government with institute and gelling them so that all of us work towards nation building. The speaker of the day, CA Yukti Arora, whom I know for over the years now, a great contributor, very keen to contribute for the cause of this profession. CA Aarti Bansal, the secretary of the board, CA Inderjit Kaur, who very passionately tries to do her job. I can see Arun Agarwal, Gyanji, Afak, and all who have joined here to go home more or less. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very brief because I have another meeting which I have to start. I would just tell you that cyber security is one of the very important areas. And Reserve Bank wants that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India be deemed as the regulators of any system audit or security audit. Whomsoever may do it, may be an engineer or a company secretary or ICW. So look at the assumed responsibilities that have been conferred upon us. And at these times, internal audit of cyber security becomes all the more important. I have been a fan of Madam Yukti because she is deeply inclined and her entire practice revolves around IT. So we could not have found any person better than Madam Yukti Arora to dwell on this topic. So not standing between you and the topic, I would withdraw. Thanks a lot, Rainderji, for saying so great things about me. Thanks, Yukti ji and Inderji ji for accepting the request to be present today. And thanks, Aarti and Arun and Gyan for indulging to make this committee a great committee to reckon with. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nandaji.
Bye.
Inderjeet Kaur.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I would withdraw. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, madam. I will withdraw. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yukti, please carry on. I look at your recording later.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And it's a real pleasure to actually be part of this thing and exchanging my knowledge on the field of cyber security. Thank you, Nandaji. Thank you, Chairman of this board, like Rajendra Kumar, Aarti Bansal, Gyan, Arun, and of course, like in the CA in the Jeet Kaur, me. So without wasting much of the time, I will straight away go to the presentation and we can just like start. So if you on the cyber security part, if you look at it, it's one of the most important area in the current day world. Why I'm saying it's one of the most important area of audit in the current day world, because it is technology which is driving the whole almost all the organizations. We hear everybody saying that we are now a tech company. They don't say, like, even the airline company say we are tech company. Even the hotel company will say we are tech company. Even the even like, for example, a retail organization which is selling fruits, etc., they also say they are tech companies. So nowadays all companies are tech companies, and if everything is tech company, then obviously cyber security is one of the key areas to consider. um, let us look at the agenda. So in this brief 2 hours presentation, I will be discussing what is the need for doing this audit, some of the approaches of doing the cybersecurity internal audit engagement. We will be discussing some illustrative risk and controls and the report aspect of it. So that is what we are going to cover in this presentation. And quickly, like, going to the need for internal audit. So let me before look at like how the businesses are done today. If you look at every business function, no matter which company you go in, no matter what type of industry you go in, you will find that the entire process, right from the revenue to the procurement to the services to the aspects of maintenance of records to the aspects of relationship building with suppliers and customers to the aspect of people, which is HR, it is totally and totally digitized. It is totally automated. And entire financials, most of it is being generated from some or other applications. Some may be having a very large ERP, some may be having a simple ERP, but some or other applications are being used. Even in our practice, in our day-to-day life, we are doing everything digitally. Right from the time we start our day, we are connected on our cell, we are connected on our WhatsApp, then we are filing everything online. The entire communication, entire mechanism in which we report is always and mostly digitized. So our customers are digitized, our clients are digitized, our vendors are digitized, our regulators are digitized, and so everything is digitized. And now everything is connected. Now, when everything is connected to everything, then how are these connections happening? These connections are happening through a digital mode, through a network, through a mechanism wherein there is an exchange of information, and that is a digital mechanism. And if it is done digitally, then definitely they are connected in the cyber world, and cyber becomes a very, very important element of audit in anything. Let us look at some of the examples in how everything is connected in the current world. So for let's simple example of any manufacturing company, entire supply chain, entire mechanisms in which we make place our requirement to the time we receive our material is connected. There is an interconnected and information is flowing through some portals, through some logins, which they are coming and doing and protecting the information. Exchanges of information is happening through a direct access or through an email. When this is the level of connection, obviously the two systems between the supplier and the organization, they definitely talk to each other in many cases, and there is a connection which is on the cyber side of it. On the plant, we are talking about industry 4.0. We are seeing most of the organizations, specifically the ones which are wanting to expand, they are automating every element of the business, including their production. They're automating by putting robotics, they are putting sensors, they are using various types of like augmented reality. All these sensors, robotics, etc., they perform the production process and pass on this information for recording in the financial system. So this is all connected. So entire production process is connected, right? And the smallest of smallest endpoints, which is my sensors, through which the information we are collecting the goods and we are moving it to the production cycle through various types of issues. All of them is sensor driven, and they are through a connected endpoints. Customers, our support to the customers, any issues, we give them links, we give them chatbots, we give them mechanisms through which they can raise the comments. They are portals through which they can raise their queries, they can raise their complaint. Any issues they find, they can report through various mechanisms, including social media, right? So, and these social media engines are also connected for the purpose of insights to various digital analytics softwares which are installed. So this is also connected. Now, every company which is thinking of innovation actually is now like technology, digitization has become synonymous to innovation. People are only thinking when they think of innovation, when they think of anything new, they think how we can use technology better, right? So that is how things are happening. And when you think of technology, you connect various technologies and you bring it together. So that's how the technology innovation also brings this digital connections and this risk of cybersecurity. People nowadays are mostly also having a hybrid working options. They are working from any place, any part of the world. So they're also connected. So when all these things, right, from supply chain to customer to client to innovation to working of the employee, everything is digitized and connected. The it's not a new risk. A risk which is very important to consider is a cyber risk. And the control which is very important to implement is the controls on the cyber side of it to ensure we have security, we have privacy controls, we have controls to manage and reduce the interconnection risk wherein the data could be changed or wherein the data could be copied or where the data could be compromised or the data could be actually altered and could result in ineffective or a loss of integrity or trust of my customer or vendors or my employees, or in fact can shut the plant or can halt the innovation initiative. Imagine like when this so much of interconnection happens, and if there is any breach, anything, the first thing which happens is loss of trust, loss of confidence, loss of in fact the innovation goes at least 2-3 years down because of the fact of the risk and the threat and the loss of trust which has happened and the reputation which has happened because of it, because of these types of things, because it brings not only the vendor and customer, as one of the parties who are generally impacted, but also the stakeholders, the various types of investors, the various types of people who are just as a socially they are involved and understanding what the company is doing. So it brings that type of mindset to the about the organization and the control environment if anything happens on the cyber side of it. So therefore, this risk is a very, very important risk to be addressed and thought of. Now, let me ask you like some questions with respect to cyber assessment for risk assessment for cyber security audit. So, do you think in the current environment, cyber risk impact is high? You can think about it. What do you think? Do you think this impact means what could go wrong, and to what extent the impact would happen? Do you think it's very, very high? I would say most of you will agree that it is actually very high. And the likelihood, how much possible it is to do a cyber attack, we measure likelihood in two, three ways. We measure based on the past history, on the past incident. So there is a huge record of cyber attacks happening and they are rising on daily basis. We measure on the possibility of it to happen, considering the sophistication of the tools and technologies and which is there. Likelihood is high. We measure that how much it's like easy or difficult to have it. It's also very high. So in all the criteria, the likelihood also is very high. So both the impact is high, likelihood is high, and therefore the overall risk rating. When we measure risk, we measure impact into likelihood gives the risk rating. Both of it is high. So therefore, it is one of the top most risks to be considered. And see, this is like not what has I'm saying. This has happened all in like so many years. In fact, best of organizations have experience. So what to say of the, and they have most sophisticated technology. They had most intelligent technologies. They have a very robust cyber security mechanism, whether it is an AI company, open AI company, to a like the one which is in the airline, to the ones which is in the food industry, to the manufacturing industry. This experience has been across, and it is not these like companies, almost every company has faced these types of breaches. And it is also said that like money comes in public forum, money doesn't come in the public forum, but ultimately every company has experience. In fact, if we look at ourselves as an individual, we also are daily subject to phishing attacks, various types of things, and we must have also experienced some other cyber attack in the recent year. Now, this is a survey which was done by World Economic Forum on the top 10 risk categories and the likelihood of it to happen for the 2 years and the 10 years like thing. And you would find in the one of the top 10 risks at the 8th number is the widespread cyber crime and cyber insecurity. So that is the like thing. So that's one of the biggest risk, one of the biggest risk, the top 10 risk which is there. And internal audit, when we do internal audit, the whole purpose of internal audit are to communicate and to like give comfort on how the risks are being addressed and managed by the organization, how the risks are being actually dealt with by the organization. So inclusion of cybersecurity as a part of an audit is not a choice. It's actually mandated. And therefore, we as an auditor are supposed to audit. And therefore, it is so important that we should know how to do it. But before we go that, let us ask certain question. Is the cyber risk part of board agenda? I would, I like almost all of us who are part of the board meeting would have seen the board now discussing on the cyber security. So surely it is a part of board agenda. Does the organization enterprise risk management consider cyber risk as a key risk? Any company you pick in the current day and look at the annual report and you look at the way they have like rating, it's in the World Economic Forum also has recognized it. So, and the most of the organizations, whether it is a small organization, whether it's in the manufacturing domain or whether it is in the technology domain, everybody has the cyber risk as one of the key risks. Do we have cyber risk in our risk universe and audit plan? Yes, surely. Like if it is a good thing, it does have. Sometimes some companies prepare 5 years plan, some companies prepare 3 years plan. So it may be spread over the thing, but yes, it is surely part of risk universe. Who is the owner of cyber risk? What is your viewpoint? Who is the actual owner of the cyber risk? Is it the IT or all function head? The answer to this is since it is spread all across, it impacts every function, it impacts every department, it impacts every way of business, and everything is connected, right? So cyber risk is not an IT risk. It's not for IT department. Cyber risk is for at each function level, and the functional head is equally responsible. In fact, they are responsible for the function. And one of the important risks which they have to consider is the cyber risk. So the owner of cyber risk is a shared responsibility. It is together, the function head being the prime responsibility of that function is actually the owner of the cyber risk. Then do we have a standardized approach of cyber risk? The same thing, same control, same type of mechanism, does it fit all or does it not? The answer to this is everything is depending on the assessment. The risk assessment which is performed, the impact and the likelihood, and basis that the control mechanism needs to be put. So there is no standardized approach, but it's all dependent upon the risk assessment, the type of risk and the control requirement which is there. And it actually goes by looking at the flow of information, looking at the flow of data, and understanding what are my crown jewels, what are the most important assets, what are the most important data. In fact, one of the most important asset in the current day world is a data asset. So looking at that and finding and doing it the flow of information is how we should be doing the risk assessment. Now, the last question is, are my internal audit team equipped to do the cyber risk? Do they have enough, first of all, knowledge and skill to do it? Secondly, considering the sophistication of the attack, considering the type of tools and technologies which are evolving, the way the digitization is happening, the way the transformations are happening by using technology, digital transformation and technology, is the internal audit team equipped? Answer to this is maybe not, because it requires a continuous learning on the IT side of it, on the technology side of it, on the thing. And it requires a very good understanding of not only the business, but also of each and element, every element of the data, of the technology, of the risk of various ways in which the cyber attack or privacy breaches can happen. So definitely there's a scope of improvement over here. And let us now look at it, how we can get some amount of thing and what are the illustrative risk and controls which are on the cyber risk side of it. So Inderjit, you want me to take questions at the end, or if there are some questions, maybe I can take it right now also.
And you can take the question at the end.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so let us look at first of all, let us look at the cyber threats and security domain. This is one of the very important element to understand. So where the threats are coming, how our threats are evolving. So the cyber threats, if you look at it, they are evolving both from internal as well as external sources. In fact, largest of the cyber threats and the risk are more from from internal like thing. But considering that they are geopolitical wars which are happening, there is lot of like places where there are certain instability. So it also arises specifically if it's a very significant or large organization having a very important place in the country, then the external risks are also very high in those types of organizations. So it's arising both internally from the people inside, and these mostly internal attacks result in data leakages, and external, like it comes from because of political instability and people trying to get, so they are malware, ransomware, various types of web attacks, DOS attacks, so, and various types of way in which the companies are exploited to get into the environment. There could be some of them which are stable and which is like, and there are a lot which are evolving. One of the biggest like risk which is being seen is an intellectual property theory. With this OpenAI and all these like thing, intellectual property has been also one of the very big like area to be think about. And then there are phishing attacks which we see on daily basis. Most of the organizations are engaging with the third party, they are engaging with vendors who are providing cloud solutions, they are using softwares, they are using their various types of people who are providing services. So from these third party vendors, from this third party softwares, from these third party cloud services, people generally assume that if we are using something, we are very secure. But it's not like that. We have to configure them. We have to implement the controls in as per our environment. They provide features, they provide mechanisms, they provide guidance, they provide various configurational options, but all these need to be configured. So the risks are evolving and the risks are moving from stable, and they are continuously changing, and they are becoming more and more sophisticated. And with the AI also coming into picture, now what we are seeing is that these like even they are being used, like these learnings are being taken and the various data and in training of the informations are happening to launch a much sophisticated cyber attack. And there are zero like days attack as so like there is no time, like it's just like earlier it used to be that there was some time where between the in first like people trying to get in and then actually launching and then it being a far reaching impact. But nowadays it's just a brink of like second in which it happens. So it's a zero day attacks which we are seeing in the current day world. So when there are these types of things which are happening, it is extremely important that companies do consider and have a very secure cyber risk frameworks and implement cyber risk related controls. Now let us look at some of the common sources of the cyber threat. The most common of it being the nation state, like which is like where there are some geopolitical wars, and there are some threat like in companies, like some countries having world wars, etc. And from those like places, we find the infrastructure companies being attacked, and those types of cyber like attacks we are seeing very common. It has happened in India and it happens all across the world in the current day. And it has been also spoken in the future that all the attacks would be the cyber risk related attacks. So that is what we have seen. Now, there are also like various types of cyber criminals which are there, who are just trying to get, and they launch this malware and ransomware type of attack. Some are activists just trying to hack. Most of it are insiders and the service providers, and they knowingly, unknowingly share information, and that becomes the reason of the cyber attack. And then another thing is when we are developing some products and services. So we don't take care, we just put the features and all those like requirements which are there and just implement that without even looking at the security part of it. And there are places where there's a substandard development of the code from a cyber security perspective, and it's not a secure code, and from those weaknesses or loopholes, the cyber attacks are generally penetrated on the application layer. So these are the common areas or the sources of cyber threats. The most common and most prevalent in the current day world is a phishing attack. Now, let me tell you what this attack is all about. It is some person who's like wanting to connect and get some information from you so that like it can come and then get an access of your application. So they send mails telling that you will click on this link. They are send mails as if saying that they belong to a particular company, but actually the mail doesn't come from that company, and they gather information from you, and that could be used for the purpose of doing the cyber attack. Then there are spear phishing, wherein there is a targeted person, a particular person who is a CEO, CFO, all those senior leadership people or the CTO or the people who are administrator. So they try to do a very focused attack on those types of like things, getting the credentials and all those things so that they can launch later on some malware or ransomware. Then there's an identity theft. This is again a very common thing, specifically on the social media. Like people take their account and then start posting as if it belongs to them. They change, even they are using with AI, they are changing the pictures, they are launching as if they are saying from there, and this even the sound they are modifying using the sound and sending those messages as if portraying they are some person. So these types of attacks we are seeing very common in the current level, and they are going to rise. Then malwares, wherein some codes are there and the system becomes infected, and later on it goes to the ransomware, where there is a demand of certain money before those things are actually released, and money of time. Even at the ransomware, when the attack happens, the company is never able to get the complete information data, and even if they pay the ransom. Then there are data leakages, data breach, copying of data. Some person, insider, knowingly or unknowingly posts certain information, and through that data, the leak happen. They are putting it in a repository which is exposed to the public, and from there the data leakage happens. So this is again a very common attack. Third party risk from the softwares, etc. The APIs which connects to various people things. So that is another source of attack. We all need to know. See, if we have to deal with the risk and the control of those things, we need to know the source and how they are being happening, and then only we can go to the understanding the risk and also understanding the control. And web attack and DOS are the very old type of attacks, which are wherein somebody start sending so much of information on your network, on your devices, on your application, and it becomes actually unavailable. So these types of attacks are the most prominent of all the things. And the way to deal with it, I would say, even if an organization doesn't have anything, the single most important way to deal with this is by being aware, and by being cautious, and by being trained to know how to identify these things and take a quick action, and take a very prompt communication mechanism so as to prevent it from spreading forward. That's a single way of dealing with it, considering the way the sophistication is happening, and every company, large or small, every even person is experiencing this type of attack. Now, what the companies, these at the bottom of it, you will see the certain boxes like which are there. So what are these like? These are in fact the things which the companies can deal and do to manage the cyber threats and this. So first and the foremost thing is to first of all have a cyber security framework. Cyber security framework is there are various frameworks which are available, but most popular being NIST framework. They are like companies that can adopt ISO 27001 also, which is also on the information security side of it. So there are multiple frameworks which are currently available, but NIST is one of the common like framework which companies may adopt, wherein you identify, you prevent, and you detect, and then you keep on reviewing it, monitoring it, and then you are resilient. You are able to, like, if something goes wrong, you are able to recover, and then so these types of things are very much like ways in which the companies can have these types of mechanism. Then asset management. Asset management, if you don't know the assets of your organization, if you don't know what the data of your organization, the biggest asset of the current day world is the data. So knowing the data, knowing the asset is the most important thing, because if you don't know what you will prevent, right, what you will detect, what you will make sure that if something goes wrong, how you will recover, how will you monitor. So the starting point of this is to know your assets, to know what you have, to know where you have, to know who is responsible for it, to know what is the risk for that asset, right? So these are some of the questions, some of the things which we must be knowing. Even in on a mobile if device, we would have seen that we generally download so many of softwares, etc., which once at point of time we may be using, but in future we don't use. So imagine in an organization specifically which is trying to develop, innovate, grow on a large, like they use multiple users, they have so many employees, they could be using multiple types of assets. So knowing that assets, both hardware, software, people asset, electronic assets, various types of data, storage locations, data assets is key. And then identifying and doing a risk assessment and identifying what are my crown jewels, what are the ones which are very, very important for us to deal with. So doing that is a very, very fundamental thing. Then the third party risk framework. This is another very important element, because many companies are using varieties of third party. In fact, various researchers have said that most of the organizations have only 40% or 50% within, and 40-50% is outside also. And these could be in form of softwares, it could be in form of cloud service provider, it could be in form of people. So it can be various like things. So having a very robust third-party risk framework, wherein I right from the time you take a decision to go and outsource to the third party, to having a proper due diligence risk assessment from a cyber and privacy point of view, to contracting, having a diligence of reviewing their SLAs on periodical basis, to billing, invoicing, and also ensuring that if there is a termination or change, then how that happens. So this is one of the very, very, very important element one needs to be looking at the time of the cyber security aspects. Another important aspect which the companies should have is looking at the mechanisms of having very good policies and procedures to manage the third party, and also monitoring those policies and procedures on regular basis. Then having a very good mechanism of application and API security, studying the applications, understanding, doing a secure code review of their application, making sure that the various aspects of management of application is very well established, and the various connections which are made through the APIs to various other applications, because as I mentioned, everything is connected. So when you connect nowadays, you connect through some or other APIs. So when you are connecting through an API to push and pull the information, there are risks which emerges, right, from the third party application, from the various sources from which you are pushing and pulling the data, information, etc. So what security measures you have for that? That is another very, very important aspect to be considered. Then baseline security solutions, wherein you define the hardening guidelines, you define mechanisms, how if you are putting any new softwares, or if you are putting any new infrastructure, or if you are putting any new underlying applications which are going, or APIs, how, what basic configuration you would do, how you will disable the default IDs, what type of password parameter they should be having, what types of mechanisms they should be having to ensure that the access is restricted on to a limited number of people as per their roles and responsibility, what mechanism they would be having to connect to various systems, what ports will be blocked, what ports will be open, how we will monitor the exchange of data and information. So having a basic like security baseline is another important aspect. Then regular monitoring, secured monitoring both on regular basis. It's not like that once in a year we do a VAPT and we are done with it. It's a continuous monitoring of the usage, the place from where the ingress and outgress are coming, and making sure that they are something which we can rely on. That is another important aspect to be considered. And any place, any point where we find something amiss, like immediately taking an action, blocking that thing, and making sure that reviewing what has like if come, and also sometime if required shutting the system so that nothing spreads further. So these types of mechanism of monitoring and operation capacity also should be there. Then data protection and database security, understanding your endpoints, specifically your endpoints of laptop, various types of, because companies are connecting to sensors, they are connecting to various devices, right? So how they are coming in, how they are, and the data how is getting entered, how it is, which data is important, which data is confidential, which data is sensitive, which data is public, and then putting a mechanisms of encryption, anonymization, various mechanisms of monitoring based on that, logging, taking permissions before they are being shared. If something happens, a notification like being enabled, blocking of certain things that it cannot be copied or it cannot be shared outside your organization. So those types of there are sophisticated tools which are currently available. So it all depends on understanding your data, as I mentioned, understanding the criticality, sensitivity, and also the aspects of how much it is relevant, and putting those controls. Then cyber incidents response and recovery. If something goes wrong, if something is identified, how to respond, who is going to respond, when it is going to respond, to whom it is going to respond, and then how we are going to review and make sure that it doesn't spread. What type of root cause analysis would be done so that it like is prevented in the future, and in case something goes wrong, what mechanisms are there to recover it and prevent that the further loss of reputation of the date of various types of like things which could have like happened because of the speech. Then securing of like my development cycle, having a very, very secure development wherein each every aspects of codes are also tested for security. There's a security and privacy by design, wherein at the design itself, we think about security, we think about having a control, we think at the row at various field levels, like who should be having what type of access, building those encryptions, building those anonymization, ensuring that there are no places where somebody can just come in the code and make the changes, right? So having a secure development cycle is one of the very, very critical element, specifically considering the type of digitization which is happening. Then security of network and wireless, it is when fundamental, monitoring your network, seeing from where the traffic is coming, blocking the ports, having the firewalls, having intrusion and detection and prevention system. And nowadays, there are advanced protection technologies which are also there. So when I say advanced protection technologies, they have this AI element wherein they see, and based on the previous actions of ours and the information and the training given to it, they themselves block the ports, they themselves take the actions, and they themselves reduce these types of like things. So that is another like element which one has to consider. That endpoint security. This is also fundamental. So when I say endpoint security is my my laptops, my pen drives, my various drives, which can I connect, my printers, my various types of mobile devices, which I connect on my laptops, etc., or to my servers, various sensors. So all those like things we have to make sure they also have a similar type of secure mechanism, because input is coming from those sources, and in fact the output, the sharing of information is happening to those sources. So having a good mechanisms of encryptions, having a good mechanisms of making sure if they are lost then nobody can copy or use it or make any like transactions from those things is another important aspect to be considered. Then as I mentioned, one of the fundamental aspect is training and awareness, and which is like wherein it's the simulation based training. You can simulate, see how people are reacting, and then identify what further trainings are required and give those training, because the threats, as threats are rising and the type of way in which the attacks are rising, the training and awareness needs to be also robust enough to make them aware what types of mechanisms are happening and how to identify them and whom to report, where to report, what type of actions to be taken if something has been identified. And then identity and access management. This is another very, very, very important aspect one has to be totally aware of. Because in identity and access, like the access needs to be given on need to know basis only. It has to be given as per the business requirement, specifically the privilege access, the people having super user access. I think ideally nobody should have in the current day world. Or a zero trust architecture is something which actually companies should implement, specifically on the access side of it, to ensure it is only on requirement basis. First they validate and then only the access is given to on the requirement. And as soon as it is done, it is removed. So that type of mechanisms can be implemented. Then simulating some phishing attacks and seeing the response. This enables the companies to train the employees, to train the people. And then, of course, the old one, the physical and environmental. This is old, but this is extremely important in the current day. So over here, like these are some of the mechanisms, these are some of the threats and some of the domains of security, which are these like domains, which are I have discussed. 16 domains I have discussed, and I'll move forward now on discussing some of the risk and the controls of it. So if you look at the risk and the controls in the current day world, the fundamental IT risk is to know what your asset is, what is that you have. So the starting point of it is to have a correct and complete asset inventory. This is in fact the most difficult task and the most challenging task, because assets are with the people and people are maybe spread across, and there would be various systems which you would have installed or put. There would be softwares which would be lying in those servers and system, which may be connecting to your applications, which could be the ERP application as well. So doing a complete review, and there could be shared drives also, wherein you may be storing the information. There could be the paper, like which you will be storing in secure manner, scanning and putting it in certain repositories, right? So having a complete asset inventory is the starting point, and it requires both use of mechanisms of technology to identify those things. Once you have done that, then understanding and those things, and from a confidentiality, integrity, availability, sensitivity point of view, and doing a risk rating of it, and making sure that you understand which one are the critical ones. After you have identified, the next step is to put a specific effort to protect the crown jewels, which have very high rating, that is, which are rated on a risk both from a impact and the likelihood of loss as high. So they should be like, and from both confidentiality, integrity, and availability and sensitivity. So those types of assets need to be protected as a like at a most priority basis. And then making sure like you have mechanisms to prevent, to detect, to manage various types of risk and monitor it on regular basis. And if something goes wrong, and how to recover it. So the starting point, as I mentioned, is to know assets, who are the owners of it, and identifying and then putting mechanisms to manage it. And mechanisms could be of not allowing them to copy, not allowing them to be transferred, making sure that they are encrypted, making sure they are anonymized. If anybody wants to share, there is an approval which happens before that. There's a mechanisms in which the people can get access to that particular information. The specific notification goes if somebody tries to get into those types of assets. So those types of mechanisms can be implemented by the organization. And if you lose that, then the way to make the entire data unusable by encrypting it, by making it so much anonymized that it cannot be used by the third party. So those types of mechanisms are the ways in which the companies may think and adopt and implement. And the controls which the companies can have is looking at those like mechanisms, the risk assessment process for the asset, and specifically the identification process. The next important risk and controls which are to be seen is that how the persons are getting access. If some person joins, how the access is getting given to that person. If some person is changing roles, how the accesses are being modified. Is there a process of approval? If somebody leaves or is not required or moves, then how it is getting removed. And what type of mechanisms we have to see if the access are as per the job responsibilities, they are appropriate as per the job descriptions. There is adequate segregation of duty. That means one person is having only maker access and not also having checker access. So there is a proper segregation between maker and checker at each level of the IT in data and information. So, and very, very fundamental thing first is to understand what are my places which the users, what are the users who are having privilege access or super user access. Super user access are those access which can do any and every type of transactions in the business. Typically, they are with the system administrators who can have every type of access to right from the creation of master to performing the transactions to monitoring of log and deleting the logs also. So how that is being dealt with. So that is another crucial aspect which we need to understand, which we need to actually identify and see if, and one of the fundamental control, the way we can actually look at is by taking the list of all the users with the roles and responsibilities. So when we take the complete list of users with their roles and responsibility, we will identify who is having super user access. Then we need to see which department or function the person is. And if it's from the IT department and function, then whether he is actually an administrator or not. And in those cases also, there is a possibility that whenever he is pulling the data, pushing the data, exchanging the data, there are logs which are generated, and some third party or some senior person reviews those types of log. If he's sharing something, there's restrictions at the firewall level that nothing from that IP can go out, right? So these types of controls can be built in the organization so that or like giving them also access only and only when it is required by having a zero trust architecture. So making the system intelligent, making sure that wherever we are having those types of assets which are critical, those like things cannot be copied and they cannot be shared, and making sure that they are encrypted. Not even administrator can access those types of things. So these types of checks and mechanisms companies may have. Then, like, how do we check this? How the access is created, modified, or by taking the list and finding out like who have been created during the year. And for those looking at the approval mechanism, the approval could be through a proper tickets which are raised and basis that some senior people or the HODs are approving or the reporting managers are approving. So looking at the evidences of approval, that is a way we can see. For the people who've left, taking the HR list and comparing it with the active user list, that could be a mechanism to test the left employee. Then how the authentication is configured, who is having access, is there a multi-factor authentication to get an access? Then taking out the list with the roles and responsibility and comparing the conflicting roles, like specifically the one who can do purchase order, if they can also do good receipt and make the invoice processing. So this is a conflicting access. People who can create the master, can they do the transaction access? So if those types of the studies are done, then in that with the roles and responsibilities, and then the controls can be defined and designed if there are gaps for preventing the loss due to segregation of duty. Then let's go to the next area, which is system and program change control. This is again a very, very important area which the companies need to have and need to implement. So one of the important aspect one which we need to consider is how the change management cycle works, how we are giving the access to the first of all, whether we are giving access to a developer to move the change in the production, how the access of developer is restricted, then whether if any new requirements are coming, how the requirements are evaluated, whether they are properly planned, they are discussed, they are evaluated, and based on that only are they approved. So that is another important aspect which we need to look at it, and we need to think about it, and which we need to plan and actually take it forward. Then selecting or designing, once we have decided that we are going to go about it, defining the requirement, making sure they are approved and they are developed as per the requirement, testing those both from a development, then interface through APIs, through various types of mechanisms, and the end user requirements are being met or not. So testing it from that perspective. And then once it has been tested, then deploying in production by through a the development should always happen in development environment, and they should be tested in the quality or the staging environment, and then from there only they should, once it has been tested, then move to the production environment. And once they have been done, then are they being maintained, are they being properly ensured that they are working as effective or not, and are they being properly supported? Because sometimes what happens is there could be bugs, there are certain issues, so having that mechanism of support is another very, very, very crucial aspect. Now, generally, how do we test this thing? We take the list of all the changes. We see entire cycle of how they were planned, whether they were approved before they were given, then what was the requirement, and then whether they were tested for their requirements by all the layers, by the developer, by the quality person, by the end users, and then after the approval, whether they were migrated by a separate person who is not the developer, and then whether they were maintained after they have gone live, whether they work as intended, and if there are some bugs, issues, etc., how much bugs are coming, issues are coming, are they getting properly supported? So looking at those things is there. So we may select some samples and look at the entire flow for these types of things. One of the very, very important from a cyber security is the patch management. So there are lot of considering the risk which are there. The companies do research from a cyber security risk perspective, and they keep on launching and sending new patches on the security side of it. Both so we need to ensure that these patches are actually reviewed and analyzed and then deployed in a production environment. Otherwise, we may not be having enough mechanism to prevent those security risks. So adequate patching. In fact, a lot of cyber incidents have happened where the systems were not patched, where we found that the systems had lacuna, and because the vendors, the OEMs provided, and there are various patches which the companies have provided, those were not like implemented. So having that proper patch management system is very, very crucial. Then, as I mentioned earlier, proper designing at the time of designing itself, having a security and privacy as an element is very, very fundamental. What happens is, I can tell you by my various examples that I have seen that systems which were developed specifically, there's no thought at all about the thing. And then the regulation comes with respect to privacy, with respect to like making sure that the data is at that particular sensitive data is encrypted, anonymized, and then that some this data cannot be shared at a field level. Restrictions are there, right? And this is it's not feasible to implement. Why? Because they were not thought of. The whole architecture was not thought of, and the whole development was not done in that manner that those security and privacy could be implemented. And if it has to be implemented, it's a huge time and huge cost because it requires a lot of rework, right? So this and then the system continues to be weak, and ultimately they have to be scrapped. So they ask lot and lot of like these types of places and these types of systems, when they connect to another application, they pose another new risk which comes to those two. So having that as a by design is very, very fundamental. As an auditor, when we go and audit this domain, we should talk to them and see how they have considered at the time of development the security aspect. If they are dealing with some privacy or personally identifiable information or health information, then how they have implemented the security element. These things one need to cover. Then how the changes and data conversions are tested and approved before they are actually implemented into the live production environment. This is another important aspect which your auditor should see, because see what happens is when you are moving from one application to another application, data you have to move from one place to another. Now, whether the correct data was properly reviewed, cleaned, and it was properly like seeing that it was the correct data or the integrity of data is there, and the data which is going into there is actually the correct information which is going, that needs to be properly tested and somebody needs to approve it before it goes into. So, what is the process which is followed for the data migration? What is the mechanism in which there is a committee or a governance which is established, wherein there is somebody who is extracting the data, somebody who's reviewing the data, somebody who's testing the data, and then confirming that yes, it is as per the requirement by doing some reconciliations, etc. And if some data needs to be, it's not clean, then cleaning the data. If there's some missing information, making sure that information is captured and the correct information is captured before we go into the live production environment. If there are some reconciling issues, if we are building some new, like we are revising our charts of account, then how that information is moving, how the alignment is happening. All these aspects are to be considered while we are doing this data conversion activities. Then segregation of duty. This is one of the most common like findings which we find. That, and this is one of the most common reason for cyber attack also, wherein what happens is the end users, they are developers, end user and those developers have access to migrate also. So in the hurry, in the emergency, they will just migrate things and they would not be properly tested, and that could be resulting in some wrong production, wrong code being pushed to production, and then it could result in breach. Or there could be weak codes which getting into production because of and without any adequate testing on the security side of it. Or they could be like developer who's even not like who's not so happy. Maybe he's and he's trying to bring some changes directly on the production environment. So and in or copying the data and sharing the data on various like places just to test, right? Sometimes pick up the data from production environment, does not do anything, and just put it on the development and the various environment which where the adequate security mechanisms are not there, and as a result what happens is there's a breach of the information. And it has happened multiple places, like people testing on the cloud environment, putting the data on the cloud environment, and then this cloud data not having adequate security and it getting exposed. So uh, these types of things are very common and they are very, very prominent reason for cyber attack. So making sure that you have adequate mechanism of securing even the test data should be anonymized. It should not be the production data. It should be a data which is like it could be a sense data which could generate for the testing purposes it's only. So synthetic data also can be produced and used for the purpose of testing. Now, so these are some of the mechanisms, and as an auditor, we need to see the entire cycle of development, the data migration, and the segregation of duties, specifically if the developer don't have access to the production, and whether there is a proper mechanism, three-tier architecture, wherein the development happens in a different environment, and then the testing happens in different, and then for after testing only it gets pushed to the production environment. And if it is an automatic push, if it's a manual, there would be a chances that like you push a wrong code, right? So those types of risk and controls one need to consider. Now let us look at one of the other very, very important aspects. Over here, I will take a pause, like, and I would like to understand if there are any questions.
Ma'am, we have two questions right now. So let me take the question. First question from Priyanka. Is it compulsory for CA to get degree for this course to conduct the internal audit of cybersecurity?
Was on mute, and so if and I think there was some issue at my end. So if you can repeat the question.
Sure, ma'am. So there is a question from Priyanka. Is it compulsory for CA to get degree for conducted this kind of audit?
Yeah, so we have a DISA thing, and it provides us a knowledge. See, actually, it's all about a knowledge, right? And continuously learning and upgrading ourselves. Even if you have some degree or something, you will have to continuously know and improve and learn in that particular domain. So it's many places, like especially the regulators, like RBI and IRD and all those guidelines on IS audit, they mandate some qualifications like DISA, CISA, these types of qualification the auditor should be having, or CISSP and all these types of things. But more importantly, what is required is to be aware and to be having knowledge of the subject and continuously reading. It is a very evolving field. And besides certification, knowing the subject on regular basis and dealing with it by understanding it through the use and also performing those audits is very important. And nowadays, like what happens is getting that knowledge and information is not difficult. We have everything available with us and various types of mechanisms. In fact, we can test every part of it because there are setups on cloud which we can do, and we can gain that experience also. I hope that answers.
Thank you, ma'am, on behalf of the participant for answering very well. So next question is from Raju. Having a cyber insurance will mitigate all cyber risks except reputation risk.
See, it will only insurances you're passing on, like, and you are getting some type of, you are getting some, like, you, whatever you've lost, you're trying to recover from it by having some mechanisms of getting the amount. But it doesn't, as you are right, so reputation, obviously, if you lose it, there's no money which can buy a reputation, right? It requires, it's a trust which you have lost, and therefore, definitely no cyber insurance can build that trust in spite of everything being done. Yeah.
So, right now, we have only two questions. Okay. Another one we have now from Vikas Davedi. Are these sections are independent areas of audit or covered in some same audit?
So they are like now internal audit. When you look at internal audit, they are generally like they are cyber specific audits which are planned, wherein you plan those types of things on an application, on the data protection, on the vendor, like third party vendor is. So they are independent areas as well. And of course, even on the process side, like for example, if we are doing hire to retire process, over there, like also we need to look at it. Who all have access to data? What type of data they can share? What type, whether it's a sensitive information, they are having access to their various types of health information as well. So how those things are being protected, how they are getting sure that no data can leak from that. So building that, and that's a very, very, because the employees share in trust, right? And in fact, that is very, very important aspect. Similar is the case with customers, right? When we are doing a revenue audit, at that point of time, also we need to look at the data element of it, how it is secure. Can we share? Because it not only can result in loss of the business and the data could be lost to competitor, but the information of customer which they are sharing with us is also a trust which based which they are doing. So it could result in reputation loss as well. Yeah. So we need to cover it independently as well as in whatever audit we do, because it is an element of risk within that process. So we can include in that process itself.
Thank you, ma'am, for asking the question. So we have another question. Is data leakage, both external and internal leakage, a threat? Or what controls are to be in place to minimize the leakage?
Yeah, so very good question. In fact, like it comes both from internal as external sources, and the control. See what, as I mentioned, that first we need to identify which is the data which we want to protect. So we have to identify our crown jewel. And then once we have done that, then we need to make like we can implement various controls. First of all, on the confidentiality side of it, we can either anonymize or encrypt, and also prevent the copying of the data. Also, we can say put a control that it cannot be sent on mails. It cannot be put on various like devices, right? So that way we can put, even when they are it's on the read also, we can restrict that only specific field can be read in a particular data by a specific person. So access related controls we can put in on these types of things. We can also put controls which are wherein on the data at rest, like if it's like totally nobody can go inside and read it. It's totally anonymized, and so those types of controls we can have on copying, pasting, sharing, anonymization, encryption, making sure if somebody is sending, then the logs get generated, somebody approves it before it gets shared. These types of controls we can have.
Okay. So Mr. Raju is thanking you. This is very helpful session he's saying. So till now we have these questions. So you can continue the session now.
Yeah, sure. Like I thought it's very monotonous. I'm speaking and then yeah. So it's better like to take some questions in between. Yeah, so I will continue further like on the IT incident like management. This is one of the very, very important things. See what happens. Let's take an example. The way the coronavirus spread, like it was a small virus happened in one country, right? And then it was never raised at such a big like thing, and then it's spread, and it spread and spread and spread, and it came to whole part of every part of the world was impacted on it. Had it been curtailed at that level itself, it would have not happened at the scale and the way it happened, right? So similar is the case with incidents, similar is the case with the cyber incident. the moment they happen, the moment somebody tries to get in and get like access or get some, or maybe encrypt or corrupt a file or put a malware, right? At that very moment, if we can isolate, if we can restrict, if we can take a corrective action and solve the problem, it's the extent of damage can be significantly reduced. So managing those types of incident becomes a very, very crucial point. And the significant element of this management is making the people aware that what is the incident, what they have to report, and then reporting these incidents. That is again a very, very crucial. So having a mechanism that where you can report, how you can report, whom to report, those are the critical elements which and a control which the company should have. And then once they are reporting, like na, they many times what they would put to or say is a simple statement, I'm not able to log in, right? Whether it is because there is some incident, security incident, or whether it is like they have forgotten their password, or whether it is that their infrastructure device is not working, or there is some problem on the device and net hardware. We need to identify and just see whether it's an event or it's a problem or it is an incident. And once we have done that, and if we have identified, then building a mechanism to do like to first of all spread like prevent its spread, to isolate it, to make sure that we then start doing the root cause analysis and understanding where all it has gone, and making sure that once we have identified, taking a complete action on it, updating various people, communicating about it to all the interested parties so that they can also take a right set of actions, and then learning and implementing the learnings on these things. So it requires, as an auditor, we need to look at the mechanisms of how this incident is being managed, how they are being reported, how they are being analyzed, how they are being ensured that they are just not a they are just either events or problem and not an incident, and what type of root cause analysis mechanisms we are having. So these types of things we should be doing. So the auditor, like when we start, we could take a list of all the, like we could go through the policies of it. We can see the communication, how the communications people are being made aware what is an incident. We can see the communication channel of where they can report the incident. We can see what mechanisms they have to review the incident. What is the timeline which they have to classify the incident and then resolve those incidents, whom to like who is responsible to do root cause, how they are going to be communicated, what type of learnings and mechanism, preventive corrective mechanisms they have. So this is all what auditor can review and audit, and it's a separate domain in itself. It's a very it's actually the layer on which the whole success of cybersecurity is there. So definitely a very good, like incident management is one of the fundamental for the cyber security thing. And we need to look at from an audit perspective, all these aspects of identifying, reporting, responding, recovering, and also learning and building a mechanisms so that they are prevented in future. And we also need to look as what are the training mechanisms for this like thing, how we are monitoring it, whether those incidents are getting timely closed, and if not, then what is the reason for it. So these types of things we need to review when we do the audit of incident management process. Then IT outsourcing service management. Again, this is a very crucial thing, because many companies nowadays, they are hosting their entire infrastructure on cloud. Many a times they are using softwares as services. Many a time they are using data as service, right? Many a times they are making the whole platforms they are using, wherein every element of it is like being used from. So there are various ways where they are people are getting there, and then sometimes it is only the people. We are taking support of third party vendors who are coming and supporting us. So all this requires a very robust, right from the due diligence to the time we select to the time we do risk assessment of cyber and privacy, to the element of contracting, including those contract clauses of indemnity, having confidentiality, making sure that security and privacy, NDAs, controls, background verification checks, etc., included in that contract, and then knowledge transfer. If somebody they want to exit, so how it's going to happen? What are the exit clauses? How they will indemnify if some data breach or loss has happened, right? What type of insurance mechanisms they are having to actually make sure that we get the entire like. So those types of things we need to review and cover. And they, as I mentioned, it could be a complete network outsource, IT infrastructure outsource, application development or maintenance, which could be outsourced. The whole of data center could be outsourced. The integration with the systems could be outsourced. Research and develop every like whole product could be outsourced. In fact, many companies are now outsourcing and having a secure operation security operations centers which are outsourced, wherein the entire security is being outsourced. Like how these people are managing, whether they are not bringing an additional risk to the organization. So that needs to be covered. And what type of mechanisms we have in case something goes wrong. So looking at the strategy, looking at the policies, making sure that there is a proper risk assessment at the time of onboarding of the customers, as well as onboarding of the vendors, having a mechanism to do a proper risk assessment, and then based on that, defining controls and ensuring that vendors also are educated and trained in a similar manner and having a similar terms and conditions, NDA, similar type of access restrictions, similar type of mechanisms in which their various devices connect to the to my application, the security of their endpoints. Everything needs to be looked at, and then the outsourcing needs to be performed. So as an auditor, internal auditor, the first and the foremost thing for us to is to understand that what all our services are getting outsourced, and then identifying them, that which are the important critical one, then identifying the risk management framework which are being adopted, what types of controls we are having to prevent and detect various types of risk which are coming by engaging third party vendors, and what types of mechanisms we have to recover in case something goes wrong. Because see, the thing is, the ultimate ownership is of the organization. The customers they are serving are the organization's customer. The vendors whom they are dealing are vendor of the organization. So ultimate responsibility lies with the company itself. It is not passed on to the IT outsource vendor or any third party vendor. Ultimately, company is responsible and they are accountable to their customers, to their employees, to their vendors, to the regulators. So having those controls, similar controls implemented is fundamental. And monitoring whether those third parties are adhering to those controls is also fundamental. So having the right to audit, making those clauses wherein they are required to get an independent audit and submitting those reports is one of the very, very important element to include in the when we engage with third parties, and when we make sure that they are data like things wherein the company even our regulators require the data to be within India. So do they have the mechanism to store the data in India territory, whether their storage locations are within the India or not? That is another important evaluation criteria which should be included and which should be considered while we are dealing with these third party. Many of these third party vendors may have like develop certain artificial intelligence models or something like that. Doing a review of those, making sure that they are not passing your IPs to somebody outside, right? And that is another important element, one need to be reviewing and looking at it, because a lot of it is black box in the AI domain at the current scenario. Now let us look at another extremely important area, which is IT operations control. And this is the key So one element we have already discussed, which is data leakage and protection. I think there was a question also around it. So one of the very important way in which we can do is also by encrypting our endpoints, having a multi-factor authentication, wherein nobody can get into the system directly. There has to be a dual authorization, connecting through a secure tunnels and the virtual private network, so that there is less chances of data and information breach. That is another mechanism. Then having a very, very good understanding of my personally identifiable information and how we protect those like things. That is another important aspect. Unless we know it, we cannot put anything, any control around it. Then second, another important aspect, which as a cyber auditor, we need to see is like if some cyber incident happened, if some ransomware happened, are we able to recover? Do we have a mechanism to recover? Do we have a proper backup systems? Are those backup available? Are those backup recoverable? Have we ever tested them? Have we ever ensured that we will be able to recover our servers if something goes wrong, if we have a ransomware attack? Do we have that data confidence? Because we have done some backup testing and all those things. Can we configure our system back? Do we have the source code backup with us? So making sure those things being available is another important area which a cyber security auditor should look at and should make sure that they are available. And the simple way to do is look at the backup process, look at the way whether the early backups are being taken or not, how they are getting stored, where they are getting stored. Then also checking the testing, whether the restoration testing was performed or not. So those types of element one need to cover. And then interface and batch processing is another important area which an auditor should look at, where because there are lot of interfaces, APIs through which we connect. So how the information flow is happening, what types of information push requests are happening. Are we connecting to an interface which is not which we have built, or are we connecting to an API which is not where we want to connect? Are we not so doing those reviews? Then batch processing, lot of data is coming sometimes on various batches, which could be scheduled 3 hours, 6 months, like three hours, 6 hours, or on hourly basis, or on 15 basis. How we are monitoring that those batches are executing successfully. If there are errors, whether they are being notified, somebody is rerunning them to make sure data is complete, accurate, reliable. So making those types of controls, the cyber security auditor can verify. And if somebody like, and if the batch is continuously failing, there could be a cyber risk. So looking at it, identifying the root cause, making sure that those are resolved on timely basis. Network security, looking at the various aspects in which the people can come into the infrastructure, can get into various types of my devices, applications, having a proper firewall rule set on my firewall, mechanism to detect and preventive and intelligent mechanisms to prevent and make sure that there are no person who are trying to get into our applications like that. So this is another thing which we need to consider while we are developing these types of applications and system. Then another like important aspect which we need to see is the training, which is the fundamental aspect. How we are training not only my employees and vendors, but my customers also, because they are directly logging in. They are providing the requirements, they are providing the orders, they are booking their complaints, they are writing the various like issues. Are they also being trained to use those channels in a secure manner? So, and whether we are providing them enough mechanisms so that they can protect the information and data. So that is another important aspect to be considered when we do. And the way we can audit this is looking at the way training was done, the content of training, how the response was, the pre-training and post-training feedbacks, and their scores, if there was some assessment. and then doing some simulation test also and finding out whether they have actually learned or not. So that these are the mechanisms in which we can do the audit and we can see the test of the training results. Then in case something disaster happens, something wrong happens, then how can the company recover? Do they have a recovery plan? Do they have a recovery strategy? Do they have a mechanism that they can actually come back in case something goes wrong? So those types of mechanisms need to be there and implemented as a part of this entire management program. So these are some of the important elements which I have discussed. And now let us look at the reporting element, which is the how like what are the typical observations we get when we do these types of audit. What are the so typically when we report, like we report the observation, the risk, the root cause, we give our recommendation and we take the management response. See, the key success to any internal audit is the root cause analysis. And generally, it is not visible on the first question. You have to go and ask second time the same and go deeper and ask the third time. It is the fourth and the fifth time you get the complete reason or the root cause of any particular issue. So let us take an example, IT asset not protected. So generally what happens is when we find out, then we find out that typically these assets, nobody is an owner, right? There is absence of an ownership. When nobody is an owner, then who is going to take the responsibility to protect it? Typically, people will say IT is the owner, but IT say, I don't hold custody of it. How can I be owner? If they are passing on the information, if they are sharing the password, if they are giving the access, if they are not securing, telling me what data is to be secured, how can I prevent and detect the breach of it, right? So I'm not the true owner. So this absence of ownership becomes the true reason for it. So many times we find that the passwords are not configured. When we go and we find out, first of all, the infrastructure or this way can be, the systems are not supported. They are outdated systems. Sometimes it is policies and procedures themselves are so outdated that they are not aligned to the way that things are. Many times biometrics are being used. And if biometrics are being used and all those things are being, and they are configuring, and there's a single sign on, many times this observation loses its impact in that manner. So therefore we need to go into a depth of it to find out. Then another typical observation, audit log not enabled. Now, if the company doesn't have those technology of logging, they don't have the storage, they don't have a mechanism where they can deal and maintain those logs in a thing. The logs are generated in a form which is not readable. Because that's a old technology, right? So the risk is or never going to be addressed. And unless we go to the root cause and we understand this, so the response to the recommendation for this should be to update the technology, to use the new technology, not to enable the law, right? So when we do the root cause analysis, we will give a right set of recommendation and right set of response would come and the observations would be resolved. The success of internal auditor is actually on the number of observations which they have been able to get it closed, right? How many, that is the improvement, that is the value which internal auditor has brought. So doing this detailed root cause analysis and giving right set of recommendations is key to the success of internal auditor, cyber security auditor. Then critical data not protected. Many times there is no contractual, though people are not even aware what are the systems, how they are getting exchanged. VPNs not being available. VPN, why it is not available? Because there's an outdated, cannot be connected, unpatched system. Nobody is getting information. No patches are not the systems are so outdated that the companies have stopped supporting those types of systems. And as a result, their patches are not coming, right? And then policy procedure non-compliance could be a training issue. It could be an issue where the policies itself are not correct and they are not updated, right? Then access not as per business requirement. Nobody knows who is having what type of access. And as nobody has reviewed and looked at it, and people have changed roles. So these could be the reasons, these could be the typical areas. Antivirus not updated. It could be the reason that we are using old systems, right? We are not having a mechanisms of where automatic update is enabled. It could be a reason where the infrastructure on which it has to be, or the softwares on which it has like to be, those are not supported. So that could be another reason why these things are not happening. Change control not followed. There could be lack of people in the organization who to, and then because of that it could not be, or there could be lack of security awareness, and that could be the reason. So these types of observations we typically find. And then the segregation of duty issue, encryption not being there. So all these are the typical observations, and this type of risk which they expose as a cyber risk. And the root cause could be multiple, right from the old technology to the absence of ownership to the contractual agreements to the training part of it, or to the lack of various types of knowledge and strategy within the organization on the cyber part of it. And very rarely I have like seen any observation being totally a technology observation. It is combination of people, process, and technology. And therefore, if the address or the recommendation should be always in the combination part of it. So I think I've covered largely. I think that's we can take question answers now. Indrajit, if there are some questions, we can take that.
Yes, sure, ma'am. Okay. So one question from Jerome. Can you please mention briefly about documenting cyber security audit performed, or is there any standard or guidance issued by ICAI?
So there are cyber security. Let's see, there are various like cyber security. SIA 520 is there. SIA 530 is there, which specifically, which is a standard of internal audit, which talks about this domain. Then, besides this, there are NIST framework. There's ISO 27000 framework, which speaks on the information security. ISO 27701 framework, which talks about privacy. So there are multiple standards, frameworks, which are there, which can be adopted by the organization.
Okay. Next question from Sarita. What should be the initial key step by the organization if the data is breached, like ransomware or data leakage, etc.?
The first, and as I mentioned, the first thing is to do a detailed impact and assessment. Like first of all, you should isolate, you should restrict, you should like turn that system, like make it totally unavailable, so that you can curtail the spread of it, and you can curtail the way the impact it could make, right? And then you should report. There are mechanisms of reporting, and it is important to report. The government has also issued an advisory. There's a cert, like nothing, the certain note you have to report. And then internally also the entire detailed assessment needs to be done of what was the root cause of it. Because as I mentioned, the root cause becomes the fundamental. When you start going into the details of it, right, you identify how it happened, and then from there you can see where all it could have spread, right, and where all it went. And then once you have done that like type of thing, then communicating to all the stakeholders, all the impacted stakeholder. Because if you don't communicate, you lose the trust further. If like some person comes to know about their data breach from some third party, or from a news, or from media, which has been the case in most of the cases, like Twitter telling that there has been a data breach by some person, who dark web person who just claimed to be the thing, or some person identifying a cyber enthusiast identifying and saying, oh, there has been a data breach in this company. So it's better that we have a preventive mechanism, detective mechanism. We keep on first, we are the channel of communication, communicate to the stakeholders, specifically the ones who have been impacted, and then build a mechanism to restrict it by having a proper either restricting the access, making the putting a complaint, getting the data back, all those types of like things, investigating and taking a preventive and corrective measures.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the question. I hope, Sarita, your question is answered well. So another question from Jerome. If there is outdated technology, so is there any need for audit of that outdated technology?
See, if their technology is outdated, obviously you need to highlight as an auditor what all is required to be replaced, what all is why it is to be replaced. So it definitely, see, auditors are ears and eyes of the board as well as the management. So unless and until we complete, we do it, we give highlight the root cause, we bring the risk to the table. No corrective action will be taken. So definitely it should be covered and it should be communicated and it should be brought to the notice of those who are charged with governance. And definitely, like based on that, the budget allocation and the next step should be there. As an auditor, it's important that we highlight these things. Yeah, Indrajit. Indrajit, are there any further questions? I think we lost you in Indrajit. Are there any further questions?
Okay. Sorry, there was some technical glitch. So, any other questions from the participants, please? If anyone is having any question, please post it so we can take up, or else we can wrap up the session. Okay. So we are waiting for 1 minute. I think no more questions. You have already shared a glance of knowledge with all of us, and that was very insightful session today, ma'am. And I would really want to thank CA Yukti Arora, who is the CEO and co-founder of Amelia Consulting Services. And thank you, ma'am, for sharing your more than 2-decade experience today in this session in process control technology, risk advisory, and IT sector. And really your expertise and insights that you take into the interests of internal audit and cyber security have provided us with valuable knowledge and practical strategies which we have, which ensure us to take into the in the sector of cyber security. So very, very much thanks to ma'am, and I would like to thanks to the organization board for their meticulous planning and execution, and we value your engagement in commitment to enhancing cybersecurity. And I would like to thank all the participants for being a very interactive and participant for the successful and insightful event. And I would like to thank everyone once again. And I think we look forward to your continued participation in future events. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Indraji. Thank you to all the participants, Internal Audit Standard Board, to ICAI, and to the chairman and the vice chairman of the committee, and obviously the secretary, and all the team of Internal Audit Standard Board, and specific thanks to all the participants. Thank you very much.
thank you, everyone. Have a good